I should have said the poet. The poet. I should have said the poet. The poet.
Sending Poets.
This is Sending Poets, a podcast about ideas. Our goal is to understand metaphorical truths within the beauty we find in the human experience. My name is John. With me is Bob and Tucker. What's up, fellas?
Morning, guys.
Hey. Morning.
And today we are continuing our effort to poetize our conversation about LGBTQ plus ideas. So we left off last time that there's this video I'd seen a while ago. It was an interview between Neil deGrasse Tyson and Ben Shapiro. I think the whole interview is like an hour plus, but it was a clip specifically about transgender stuff, and it went pretty quick into sports. And so this is our launching point here, because there's a lot to say in this realm, I think. And just spoiler alert, I don't think the three of us have any answers. Because it's very complicated, but I think at least at this stage, and for sure, at least with us, I think the point is the conversations is really thinking through these things and trying to appreciate, all the angles versus just trying to settle on a binary thing. It's either this or that, So one of the things that I really appreciated that that Neil deGrasse Tyson says to Ben Shapiro is, this only matters because we have a history of segregating sports between male and female. So, from that standpoint, then I think it's easier to kind of appreciate things. And even that, isn't a strict binary either. This might sound funny, but it's true. There's Muggle Quidditch, and that's co-ed. It's males and females playing the same sport together, and there are sports where it isn't segregated. But in the context of and to draw it back to this conversation I had with my neighbor now, a few weeks ago, he specifically mentioned it was kind of big in the news at the time. It was a transgender swimmer assigned male at birth, transitioned to female, competed in female, swimming, won, beat everyone else. I don't know the specifics. I don't know if it was a close race or what even the swim stroke was. I don't know that level of detail, but I know that it's kind of been a point that fuels a lot of the discussion that I was getting from my neighbor specifically, that how unfortunate it was that the second place person who had trained her whole life and was really she just got beat by a guy, was his point. And we did have some good back and forth, by the way, that my neighbor wasn't willing to acknowledge the preferred pronouns here of the transgender swimmer. So we kind of got in a word puzzle with each other because I was like, he's swimming against women, and he's like, well, no, says he's a girl. So I was like, so she's swimming against other women, and he's like, well, I don't think that's how it works. And I was like, what do you think she thinks about that? And he said he would probably disagree with me, is what he said, and I appreciated that, as opposed to, well, he's wrong, So those things are out there. It's not all binary, that even the arguments and stuff. So I think that's helpful. But anyway, to go back
and
to,
I think and I might be off a few percent here or a few places, but he, as a competitive male swimmer, was ranked like 400th in the world.
Mm.
And after transitioning, he's ranked as the number one woman swimmer in that event. And it's, I can see both sides of that,
Sure.
but I have to ask, did he really decide to become a woman just so that he could compete against women in swimming and be number one? Or did he choose to become a woman because that is his truth and she just decided to keep swimming because that's what she loves to do?
Yeah, and I think you can distill that question into, is he trans or not? Because in South Park, and the brilliance that they are with like satiring things. I don't know if you guys remember. It may have been around this exact same time, but it definitely was an episode they tackled this with, and I don't know if you remember, but
It's pro wrestling, wasn't it?
well, it was Randy Savage. Randy Macho Man
yeah.
Savage comes, registers as a kindergartner at South Park Elementary, but as a female, and it's track day, and he just dominates. And it's very funny because that's the point of the story, is like, oh, okay, yeah, here's the fear that somebody who's massive physically is going to just say, well, I'm a girl so that I can win everything. And the point that I got out of that is like, that's not the transgender experience. So that's so back to your question, Tucker, like, if this swimmer transitioned only to win, I would say that's not what a transgender person experiences. The transgender experience is the latter that you said, Tucker, that this is their truth. They're, and they love swimming, and so they, kept swimming. To me, it's, oh man, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but it almost seems very binary. You know what I mean? That if the fear is like someone's just going to do this just to dominate, well, that's not the transgender experience,
Well, and here's where it's once again not binary. Even if he did do that, he doesn't actually live that truth. He did it just to be number one. It kind of doesn't change my bigger picture of it, which is I can look at that race that he won and say, okay, he just won as the top woman swimmer in the world. And I can go, but me as an individual, I understand that he only won that because he used to be a man. And then you know what? I can just go about my day. Like you can. Nobody is saying. I won't say nobody because there are people who would say this, but no one is saying that you can't understand on an individual level that person only won because they used to be a man. Nobody is stopping you from doing that. So you're fully capable of looking at that number two swimmer and saying as an individual, she is the top woman swimmer in the world. Period.
Yeah, biological, I think is that he said earlier, like,
Yeah.
even for her own, and I think this goes back to what Neil was saying in the video. He was kind of suggesting, okay, so we have this segregation in many sports, male, female, but even within that, let's think about like weightlifting, wrestling, boxing. There's weight classes, within the either male or female, and there's rules and regulations around steroids, which are hormones. So there already is some pieces in place to intentionally keep things at more of like an even competitive level. Do you know what I mean? So I remember he suggested, I don't know, maybe in the future that becomes more prevalent in these other sports, competing based on specific hormone levels versus, oh, you were born with this reproductive organ, then you can only compete with people born with that reproductive organ, period. I like that notion that, hey, just like everything else, this could change with time and evolve, and maybe there's a better way to do this with certain things. So, I'm not a big sports guy myself, so I don't have a lot of investment in this, personally, but like it certainly seemed like a positive direction to be considering. Like, there's probably a way to figure out this solution versus just totally shutting it down, because, this, how unfortunate that, this biological woman would have been first place but wasn't because a trans person came in, and like, we got to shut that down, people. Like, we can't have this. Like, long term, I don't think that's helpful at all. Like, let's think about the reality of it.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think we already segregate more than men and women. We just don't say it. So you don't see many Asians in the NBA, right?
Mm.
Because there's already an evolutionary segregation that's happening where most of the time they are not genetically built to compete at the highest level at that sport.
Yeah, like
Because
Bob was saying
that
before we started
specific
recording,
sport,
like,
if you're 6'8" and you can jump 40 inches in the air, you're just there. And
competitive advantage.
there is
Doesn't
competitive
matter how
advantage
much.
there.
Doesn't matter how much you want it, or will practice, or will try. If there are certain things that are built upon the biology, in that the rule set of the game with the hoop at 10 feet high, etc., that's gonna create a filtering effect.
And yet there are inspirational stories about people that, against all odds, still did something good, right? Like,
Was the guy
sure.
Muggsy Bogues? I don't know if you guys know Muggsy
yeah,
Bogues.
yeah, I
Okay, it's
remember
like
from way
five
back.
foot three. Yeah, 5'3".
He was on the
Also,
Olympic gold medal team, right? I think way back in the 90s or whatever, right?
also, let's do a shout out Yao Ming, our Chinese brother.
Right.
Who's like 7'3" or something. So,
Right.
I mean, there are things that can go through, but what's interesting, in my opinion, what's interesting in the topic, and I think it shines a bright light on the cultural ramifications of this subset that, like Tucker says, doesn't really matter. I mean, some people do have scholarship opportunities, some people have career opportunities. So there are financial incentives, and there's
Sure.
prestige and stuff, and maybe you love to do this thing, and you worked your whole life to do this thing, and so you're personally invested in it. So it's not so easy. Maybe I'm not invested, and Tucker and John's not invested, but the person who is now in second place instead of first, maybe they're very upset. I don't know. But my point is, the sport itself is arbitrary. The rules are arbitrary. The definitions of who is allowed to play and not play, are made up by somebody arbitrarily. I mean, there's no universal objective truth that football is played as follows. Like, that just doesn't exist. So I come back to this concept. Kind of goes back to what we were talking about, respect. Meaning, you have respect for, you follow the rules of somebody through respect instead of fear, if they've done something to earn that respect. And here's my point. I just thought of this as you guys were discussing. I think it's maybe not a full solution, but maybe a partial solution. What about whoever started the sport or started the organization? Meaning the person who, like, there's nothing stopping anybody from starting their own organization of whatever, right? WWF, somebody started WWF once upon a time, and someone else did a competing organization, and they had different rules. Someone else, there's how many different boxing organizations, like, they have so many different belts and stuff. What's to say that the solution isn't to try to have all the spectrum fit into a quasi-binary system of arbitrary activities? Like, you made up Quidditch. That was just made up on the spot. Somebody made that up. It was completely a new thing. And why not?
Right.
So why
a person
not?
who's not even a sports person herself, like, and she made up this amazing game. Anyway, yeah, keep going.
No, that's exactly it. So my point is, maybe the limitation we're imposing is arbitrary. Like, why do we limit it to only NFL?
Yeah.
And there's Canadian football, I guess. I don't ever watch. I'm not really a
Yeah,
watch
I think
football
there's
player,
like XFL and UFL also. I mean, yeah,
yeah,
there's
maybe.
other.
So my point is, this goes back to the concept on the cultural level. I don't think we'll ever get agreement on, if someone says the pronouns are not for them, they can't get around it, and someone says, yes, it's meaningful to me, use these pronouns. There may be no bridge there. They may just have
Mhm.
to agree to disagree, and they go their separate ways, and they can live each other's has their own fulfilling life, and there's no reason to impose one person's will upon the other or vice versa.
Mhm.
Why not just make it, well, whoever organized the sport, let's just start there, because somebody organized these originally. Someone made up track and field, someone made up swimming, and these are all arbitrary. Like Tucker said, he doesn't know what the stroke this person competed in, what their event was. Well, what the fuck does that mean? It's just like somebody decided, if you're on your back and you put your arms this way, it's called the back or whatever. I mean,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
There's just
Yeah.
labels on these things. So why do we have a one size fits all?
Mm.
Now, this is a rhetorical question. I'm not trying to get you guys to answer this, but why are we so invested in having a unified acceptance of one way or the other? It seems like it's putting us into a fight we don't need to be in, to divide up our holistic team, where we say, on the team of Americans or on the team of humans, we should respect each other in what we create. So if you are going into somebody else's creation and you want to abide by their rules, great. If you don't like their rules, you can compel them through argument or information. Try to persuade them through dialogue. But if they say no, we want it this way, go make your own.
Mm. Mhm. It's
And then just
kind
let
of
it be
the
just let it be like an experiment, like a test tube, like many test tubes. Like, this is one of the things I go back to many times, because I used to be a beekeeper, and one of the realizations is beekeepers have at least two hives, because if you only have one hive, you don't really know what you're doing. Like, stuff happens, but you can't compare one hive to the other, so you don't know if you're actually getting a result because of what you did or because of some arbitrary random thing in the environment that happened. So having something to compare with is powerful. And to say that we all have to play basketball under these rules, well, maybe I want to make a new game. It's like basketball, but it's a little bit different. We use roller skates.
I was just thinking. I was just thinking, like, yeah, like a rollerblades or roller.
You
Wow,
son of a bitch, I'm in.
That's
Now I want to
amazing.
watch a sport.
Dude, yeah. But right, because
Yeah.
more sports is better. Like, I don't think anybody could say, look, Bob, if you do roller basketball, it's going to impact the NBA. Obviously, it's not. There's no way, shape, or form it would. Now, maybe it won't succeed. Maybe it's just us three, and we're the only ones that are interested in this thing. But at least that's what freedom's about. Freedom's about the opportunity to build your own thing, and if you build it, they will come, or maybe not.
Yeah. Right. I mean, who knows? But yeah. But yeah. No, I love it. I was just gonna say, like, it kind of reminds me of a very similar critique, but in the realm of literature, and fan fiction is that, right? Like, sometimes people get very upset about the way an author goes with a storyline, and like, oh, they could, just like you said, like, write your own, like, this, that we have this freedom. And at the same time, I can see the idea, or reality, that a person who is kind of upset that someone went in this direction, and they shouldn't have done that, and then approach with this alternative view, write my own story, but maybe thinking like, I'm not a writer, I'm not really interested in that. So, well, what do they do? Either maybe let it go, or what's great about now is, like, hey, there's generative AI assistance for things. Like, it opens up this whole new realm of possibility for expressing that freedom of creating something. So that's a different topic, but all of that I think does tie in together
But
at
let me
some
ask you guys.
fundamental level.
Let me ask you guys. I'll play John for a second. I'll be the host here. What do you guys think about where you have a single school system? You have a local, and then a state level, and then say a national level of a given sport. So a recognized sport that we're not going to say this guy invented it. It's not a private sport. Meaning baseball is both a professional activity and high schoolers play baseball or softball or whatever, right? So what do we do then at the level of where we are trying to unify these events, these sports for some purpose, self-development, the contest, the excitement, the character building. What do we do when we can't just say, let's replicate and go start your own? What do we do about that?
So I've got an answer that I know people aren't going to like, but you want to have a man who is biologically born a male, has gone through puberty, is now transitioned and on the women's swimming team, and he's just killing it. Well, I think it's a larger metaphor for society as a whole, where there's times in your life where you are presented a situation where you are clearly at a disadvantage and you can't win. And that's just part of life. And there's not a damn thing you can do about it, because life is messy and life is unpredictable, and you don't always get to win. Basically, you don't always get to win.
You know what that
And
reminds me of,
sometimes it's
Tucker?
unfair, and it shouldn't be that way, but it is, and that's just what it is.
Do you guys remember in Star Trek, I think it is, there's this, it was in some of the Star Trek movies, where there's this space fleet exam that they go through, and there is no solution. Like, you will fail. They make it so that you don't know it going in. Are you familiar with this? Is that recall for you guys?
It's not the Kobayashi Maru thing.
It
right?
is. That's exactly what it
wow.
is. John, you crushed it there. Okay. So that's so fascinating to me, Tucker, that you bring that up, because as a concept, I think that is valuable. And I think that is an interesting take on it of, sometimes it's almost like when you're playing blackjack and the knucklehead in front of you doesn't hit on the card he's supposed to hit, and he just stays, and then it comes to you and you bust out, and you're like, well, dealer, I just want to see what would have happened if he would have hit like he's supposed to, playing the rules, and you still bust out. Like, you're going to lose either way sometimes as you play it through.
Yeah.
And the key takeaway from that is, even in the situations where you never could have won, you still got to stand back up and brush yourself off and go find the beauty in life. Because it's out there. It's out there.
Yeah. Bob, I don't know that I have an answer to your question about what to do, but the things that come to mind are like what not to do, like, and this kind of goes back with because this goes back to some of your values, right? With your kids, like, don't complain, don't make a big deal about how unfair it is, and kind of what Tucker said, maybe acknowledge it, pick yourself up, dust off, find some other beauty. I think we talked about it. I think there's a line between complaining and looking for something that could, maybe be changed to make it more fair for everybody, pursuing that, but coming from a place of, it's hard to formulate this into words, but yeah, coming from a place where it's like, because this is for the greater good thing, seems more helpful than coming from a place of a personal vendetta, the character, the Louis Strauss in Oppenheimer, so it's like this personal vendetta, if that's the genesis of this wanting change, is just to, get back at somebody, I would call that a thing, something not to do,
It's like the origin story of some villain you've just created now.
Yeah, right.
Right. Yeah.
And the Kobayashi thing, because the 2009 Star Trek movie. It was the one J.J. Abrams did, which, for my money, one of the absolute most incredible opening scenes of a movie when it comes to just what's happening, and then when the like theme music comes in with the title card that says Star Trek, dude, it's goosebump inducing. Oh man, it's so good. But anyway, that's the Kobayashi Maru that I know is from that movie. And I don't know if have you guys seen that movie?
I have not yet. I
don't
need to.
I don't recall, but
Highly
but I think
recommend. It's really done well. What Kirk does in that is he hacks into it. He hacks into the
he cheats.
program.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
cheats.
yeah, yeah, and just but blatantly is just like, yeah, everything's gonna be fine, and he found an exception. He found a way to not just give up. So is that because he had this personal vendetta against Spock? Because in the movie, Spock, I think, is the one who created the Kobayashi Maru test, and it is to illustrate a no-win scenario. Like that's the whole point, is just to
Exactly.
like face yourself with like, Tucker, you said like it's not always fair. Deal with it, and Kirk is like, deal with this, whatever. Anyway, anyway,
Well,
back to the
actions and reactions, right? Things
yeah.
it will leave that. So game theory is what I'm getting at. So a lot of this will end up being, because none of us are obviously competitive to the extent of committing our life, towards a sports related goal. I would imagine people who are, there's going to be some game theory behind their decision making. And why does Lance Armstrong cheat? You know, Lance Armstrong from the
Right.
Tour de
Yeah,
France,
yeah.
and he
Yeah,
was America's. Pardon me.
because everybody else was cheating, and if he
Exactly.
didn't,
That's.
he
Thank you.
couldn't
Thank
have
you, Tucker.
competed.
So when they go back, by the way, when they go back and they did the advanced testing, I think it was 1 through 16 or 1 through 14 were all excluded. Meaning once they store the blood over time, and once they had the testing that was able to adapt to the arms race of the doping versus the testing, you would be non-competitive. You would not even be on TV, let alone fourth place, fifth place. You wouldn't be on the podium. You literally wouldn't even be in the casting of the show, because of how far down you would go if you were not doping. And so it becomes this game theory uh, situation where it's hard to tell where it's going to go, but each person is going to change their behavior based on everybody else's behavior, and on it goes. So I think it becomes a complexity situation. And so, is that back to the sports thing of let's have many, many different sports? Why not have roller basketball and all the rest? And then you can kind of get away from this game theory competition level of, how do I, because let's go to bodybuilding or something. Obviously, in the open, untested bodybuilding competitions, all those people are using hormone enhancements. To not use hormone enhancements would be silly at that point, right? You're not going to
You're
be
not
able to
on
get
that
up.
stage.
You
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to
Yeah.
go on that. They wouldn't even understand you're a competitor. They would think you're like part of the staff or something. If you were to walk out there completely natural, unenhanced, on a Mr. Olympia stage or whatever, where these behemoths are muscle on top of muscle on top of muscle, etc. So understanding that, you can make sense of it, because everybody is now back to an equilibrium of competitiveness, because they're not saying, hey, like imagine the counterfactual. Everybody gets tested but one person. Who do you think is going to win that every time?
Yeah.
So obviously, and it would be simple. It's just the guy who weighs, has 60 pounds more muscle than every other guy is going to be the guy who wins that. So I think there is going to be some issue with, if you have a singular competition. So you have a school district. Your kid is in that school district. They can't just choose to go into another swim race, or they can't choose to go into another basketball event where all the people are 5'5" and under, or whatever. I mean, so there's got to be that. This is where I don't have an answer, and I think we started by saying we
Yeah.
don't have an answer.
Right.
Is the ability to give both choice and have a level of competition that scales up from the local to the regional to the national level, which people seem to like. People like to see the national championship in football, but it starts with you have an individual college or university, and then they're in a conference. And then the conferences play each other for a national championship. So people like that structure, and it's all arbitrary. Once again, everybody, big blinking signs. There's no objective truth here. It just does not exist. So how do you square this thing with the fact that it's all arbitrary? Someone, 100 years ago created the sport, and there are people that own the rights to do the sport now, and people are, making a living or getting scholarships by following the rules now. So what do we do?
Yeah.
I think what we do is we acknowledge as a society that organized sports on that level is insanity, and that we take seriously people who, what do you do for a living? Oh, I swim. What? That's not a thing. Like, be a productive member of society, for fuck's sake. What do you do? What do you do for a living? I play football, a game we played when we were kids. That's not a real fucking job. Like, to me, become a productive member of society.
What is interesting though is like, there are tons of people who make a livelihood from that thing, not just the people who play it, right? Obviously, like there's a whole, I'm sure there's hundreds of podcasts that talk about football or sports or whatever, newscasters, sportscasters. Yeah, I mean, like it is interesting. The whole economy is I just want to clarify, I didn't say our whole, but a whole economy exists around some of these things. Merchandising, people that run the venues. You know what I mean? It's yeah, right. Betting. Oh my God. Yeah, right. It is gnarly. Like I like your point, Tucker. And then it's like
billions of dollars go on the NCAA tournament every year.
Yeah.
Like
right.
And my argument is like, look at society. Right.
I'm not saying you're wrong, Tucker. I'm not saying you're wrong.
This is like, yeah.
If we could just sort of peer into a parallel universe where maybe sports wasn't as important as academics, maths, science, you know what I mean? And that kind of interest was the kind of interest.
Yeah. Quick side here, John. This is a thing that I might have mentioned this. I probably not. I've got an idea. Okay. Instead of if we do what Tucker says, there's going to be a vacuum. There's going to be an entertainment vacuum, a stimulation vacuum. So what do we replace it with? What I think is scientific experiments where we come up with hypotheses, like as a giant board, like testing things, like whatever, it doesn't matter, testing or inventions. And then you have a group of people that run the experiments to try to falsify or prove the hypothesis. And that could be a form of betting. This is very nerdy. I'm already feeling anxious by speaking these words aloud. I don't know. Maybe.
You're good. It's a safe
space.
Okay.
So
this is a safe space.
I'll keep on going there. Okay. So imagine the heroes are the people who come up with the best hypotheses and the people who run the best experiments. Like those are the ones we look up to. Those are the ones that our kids emulate. And so it becomes a productive endeavor that is both exciting and competition. Because here's the thing about competition, guys. There's the unknown. Like it's like a gamble. It's like you don't know what the outcome will be until the game is done. Yeah. And I think humans are inherently invested in that concept, that process. And then number two, I think it's a test, meaning there are very few activities in this world. Like we make ourselves up to be way more than we are. I'll speak from personal. I'm not going to speak for you guys. Personally, I make myself out to be way bigger than I am. How do I know where I really am? Compete with another person who also thinks that they're the shit. Okay. So it's like a real world grounding of one's ego to actually go out, line up against the other team, snap the ball, smash heads. You're going to find out what the fuck is really going to happen if you do that thing. As long as both teams in the locker room are saying, if we do this, we're going to win. If they do that, they're going to win. Like nobody knows until somebody snaps the ball and you smash each other and find out who's actually going to win. So there's something inherent about that.
Yeah. I love your idea about like a scientific method competition show, specifically because I can point to a Veritasium video. It was about cognitive bias, and the end of the episode, he's talking about, the point of the scientific method isn't to necessarily prove the hypothesis, it's to disprove it,
Correct. Yeah,
over and
it's
over
like
and
an
over. And
antagonist.
the more you disprove the hypothesis and the next hypothesis, and the whole point is that you probably are getting closer to what the actual truth is. And so I
Exactly.
love the idea that in a competition show, I can't remember exactly how you phrased it, but like, the reward, the winner or whatever, would be the person who, did the best job disproving, you know,
Well,
showed the
here's how it
actual
goes.
scientific method happening the way it's supposed to, not succumbing to cognitive bias and just, well, I think this is
Exactly.
what it is. Here's my test. Look, I proved it. I proved it's right. That wouldn't get you as good a score or whatever as the person who's like, I think this is what's going to happen. Here's how I
Exactly.
did to disprove it. You know,
And having
in a way, it's not intuitive. I think maybe for humans, right? To think of like the whole point is to disprove what I think it is, because the more I can
we
disprove what I'm thinking, the closer I'm probably getting to truth.
what we want is the information, meaning society as a whole progresses. This is back to Tucker's point. Like whether the Raiders or the Jets win the game, it doesn't help society. Who cares,
Mm.
really? So there's nothing gained on a shared level to this team was better than this team on this day. But if we find out that the speed of light is not what it was previously thought to be, there's
Mm.
impacts there for all society.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
here's my point, and I've really thought about this, guy. So I do feel a little bit anxious talking about it, but here's what my point. Imagine the bottleneck is funding, because we build these billion-dollar stadiums, because we pay these players, multi-million-dollar contracts, because we have all the Las Vegas sports betting fueling this arbitrary competition that is meaningless on the global scale of shared humanity. What if we redirected those funds to have real world, big scale experiments to attempt to disprove real world, big scale theory? So
Yeah.
a head to head matchup, theorists versus experimentalists,
Mm.
and the betting. So people would then bet on the outcome. And that always, so here's what happens,
Wow.
guys. If you want to know the truth of a given thing, put a monetary value on it and open it up to market betting. I'm not kidding. This is how you
Yeah.
find out the future.
Wow. Yeah.
And so when you combine these three things, the betting, the public funding, and the antagonistic relationship between theorists and experimentalists, I can see real world benefit at the point of literally changing the earth, literally changing the world, and maximizing the very best, smartest, hardworking people, and giving them the glory and the honor and the compensation.
See, and I've got a different idea. And I think it's that, okay, maybe sports doesn't have to go away. It can stay. People get enjoyment out of it. But I think if we're going to do this as a society, we should also be taking the top 500 educators in our country and giving them $1 million contracts and putting them on your television 5 days a week doing their thing for free for society to learn from.
Mm. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
we're only offering these kind of benefits and careers to the most physically capable people in the country. Well, why are we not elevating the most
Mental
mentally
fortuity. Yeah.
mentally capable people in the same way
Well,
and
can I
giving
can I
them that spotlight to spread those seeds of knowledge and improve society as a whole?
Yeah.
well, let me talk to this real quick about what is the game a proxy for? What is football a proxy for? It's obviously warfare.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Right.
so it's an evolutionary adaptation. So instead of us literally one town fighting the next, literally attacking each other, literally one tribe versus the other tribe, it's a symbolic attack. It's a symbolic war. where we can have red team versus blue team, rah, 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 in the stadium, get their angst out, get their energy out, scream at their opponents, scream at the fans of their opponents. Everybody gets furious and releases all this, energy and angst and whatever. And then at the end, one is very happy, one is very sad, but we line up and do it again next week.
That I think you just encapsulated. I don't want to speak for you, Tucker, but I'm pretty sure you'll agree here. I think you just explained why Tucker and I gravitated toward death metal for that thing, because there's no losers at the end of a death metal show, dude. And everybody still gets their aggression out, and it's fucking everybody like just ends up loving each other,
Yeah. So you think there's a biological need or imperative to have that feeling?
Oh yeah, and I
The
think
release? Oh yeah,
especially
100%. For me,
especially in post-pubescent males, like there is absolutely like this aggression hormone that has to be burnt off. There has to be a healthy outlet for it, because if there isn't, then you get into unhealthy behaviors.
So then
And I think that
ain't gonna fly.
eases as we age. And I truly believe a lot of it's just hormonal. You can control it, but you can only control it if you have that outlet for it. You have to dump that hormone rage in a healthy way. You can't bottle it up. You can't ignore it, or it will come out in ways that are harmful to yourself and society as a whole.
Yeah.
So I mean, I understand the need for sports. I understand the need for the competition, and it's biologically part of us. And I don't think it should ever go away. I say just get rid of sports. No, there's a place for it. I don't think that place needs to be elevated as high as it is without also elevating the part of us that makes us uniquely human, and that is the ability to learn complex concepts and to change the environment we live in. That should be elevated just as high, and it's not.
Yeah. I mean, we grew up with Bill Nye, the science guy, right? He still's out there doing some things. I think he has like 2 or 3 shows on Netflix that kind of come and go throughout the years. Neil deGrasse Tyson, I think we were texting before the show, and most of the time for me, he kind of comes across as an entertainer more than an educator. But every so often he'll drop something that just, the way he was talking about Stardust and stuff. I saw a video the other day, and it definitely choked me up, the way that, we're all part of this. He probably was, I don't know, probably he may have been paraphrasing Carl Sagan, but it was
Crosby,
the way he
Stills,
said
and
it.
Nash, my friend. That's Crosby, Stills, and Nash.
Yeah.
Hey.
Well, no, Tyson was like, Tyson grew up around Sagan. Like,
yeah.
I mean, he was kind of a protege, and he does capture some of his magic, but he didn't capture all of it. He's got a piece of it, but he's
right. And to that point, like, I mean, it's not like anybody's going to be Carl Sagan again, right? So, but I like your point, Tucker, that like, so that's 2 people. Like, well, okay, so then if I think it's out there. I was trying to like rein my brain back in here. I totally agree with what you're saying. I don't think that there's a intention like with society to throw money at these things to get it more visibility. And there's probably a benefit to doing that. At the same time, it is out there. Like, if you're interested in it, because we live in the age of the internet, and you can find all these things on YouTube, and YouTube will know, like, you're interested in this. Here's this, Brian Greene, I think, is another guy, right? Michio, can't remember his last name, but I think you guys know who I'm talking about. I mean, there are several people that talk about really amazing scientific concepts that you can put in front of your face 5 days a week if you want.
That's true. And part of me was going to say, maybe we should do something where it's like, oh, it looks like you're about to watch today's NFL game. Well, before we unlock this, you need to watch these 3 Veritasium videos.
Right.
But going back to what Tyson was saying with Ben Shapiro is, are we a nation of freedom or not?
Yeah. Right.
And if we're free, then sports needs to happen, and whoever wants to participate in that can.
Yeah.
And if we're not, then we regulate it out of existence.
Let me steel man
Yeah,
freedom
right.
on the other side. Just going back to this, make more organizations. So let's just say I make roller basketball, and I make a rule set only, and I'm partially redheaded. Let's say redheaded people like gingers. Only gingers need apply. Okay, but it's my organization, and I make this thing up. Is it freedom for someone else to come in and tell me that I can't do that?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why, I don't think there is a solution that's going to make everybody happy.
Exactly.
And that's the bigger picture is that's life. Not everybody's going to be happy. So go do the thing that makes you happy.
But then which side is the side that gets the freedom, though? Is it the side where someone who's not a ginger who wants to play roller basketball in my league, do I have to let that person in? Do they get their freedom, or do I get my freedom and they have to go make their own league?
Right. I mean, it just, I think it's a kind of a thing where until it's a reality, it's only hypothetical. So yeah, we can talk through, here's what we would do. But what is the saying about when the whatever hits the pavement? I don't know. It's something like that. But when it happens,
when the rubber hits the road.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going for. I don't know where I got pavement from. Thank you. Anyway, when it happens, yeah, what do you do? I mean, through all the hypothetical and theoretical that you could imagine, it doesn't really matter until that moment that someone's like, hey, this sport. And see, I think the whole point is because at the point it happens, that's when you know all the background. There's a real life situation where somebody is, because what I'm getting at is hypothetically, we could imagine, Bob, you've had this league going for years, and there's this blonde kid that grew up watching it. Just his dream was to play in this, and he knew he's not a redhead, but it's like the most amazing sport, and it's his dream. He can't think of anything else to do. And then finally he's old enough and he comes to you and says this. And like, hypothetically, it seems like you'd be cruel to be like, sorry, dude, it's only redheads, fuck off. Or, make up your own league or whatever. I guess we kind of did go to that earlier. But the whole point is we can hypothetical and theoretical, like infinite scenarios, right? Until it actually happens. That's when you know the reality.
I agree.
And then,
yeah.
I was
gonna say, I'm trying to steel man the concept of respect, in that the respect is earned so that you follow the one who creates the thing. So whoever creates the thing should be in control of the thing. They shouldn't be. And then mutual respect. So then the blonde-headed kid makes a league, or I know this is hypothetical, back to your point, you can't do that because the kid is not going to have the same.
Well, you can. I'm just saying it's only goes so
not
far.
The same way. Hold on. I think this is a good point, because imagine you're 18 and you're now viable for the league. Well, yeah, you could start up a blonde-haired kid league of roller basketball, but it's going to take 10 years. So you will not ever realize your potential if you're not. Maybe you're not a manager kind of a guy. Maybe you're a player kind of a guy, and you would have had a great career. Let's do a real one. Not this one. I love this, by the way. I'll probably keep this in my head, this roller basketball league. But let's talk about baseball. Let's talk about baseball. And there was a Negro League, and there was a Major League Baseball league. And over time, the culture changed and they were unified. And so players were able to play on the same. Now, it wasn't comfortable. It wasn't easy. Jackie Robinson had to go through a ton of bullshit and all the rest. And it lasted for years and years. But eventually it played out to a consolidation of two leagues into one. What we're talking about is, from one league, many. And it's so it's a different paradigm here. It's an interesting thought experiment. I'm pleased that you bring up the concept of the difficulty of taking a theory and making it a reality. I think it's a valid observation.
Yeah. And to your point about like the person who created it should have control, like, I think that makes sense too. Um, Maybe more so during the early stages, right? Because like go back to baseball. Um, Shit, is this the right name? Abner Doubleday? I don't know. For some reason, that name maybe he was
Yeah,
credited with kind of
no, that's
inventing
it.
baseball,
That's
right?
it.
But
Yeah.
like, was he still alive when Jackie Robinson's, was
Oof.
playing all that? I mean, my
I
point is
don't
that
know
he's not
that
alive
answer.
now. My point is he's not alive now. So like
Yeah.
at some point, if it's a thing that's created, there is a transition where all of a sudden the thing has its own life, and it's the
Interesting.
the the creator. I think this kind of, I'm sure we could think of a lot of examples like this, or the creator.
Well,
Oh, you know what,
how
here's
about
another
this?
example. Oh, can I say this other
I was gonna say,
example real quick?
yeah, please go ahead.
J.K. Rowling invented the wizarding world. In many ways that doesn't belong to her anymore. It's taken a life of its own. There's video games, there's all the fan fiction and things that, like, she's still the creator. Sure, she's still like, you can still say like, if is this canon or not, like these storylines, these ideas, if she says so, then it is so. But there's this whole other realm that's just, it's exploded into its own life, and people make a living, building games and things from it. And Muggle Quidditch, I'm pretty sure it was part of the, or at least was being considered to be in the last Summer Olympics, I think. There's these whole things that just, it becomes its own life. So the idea that like, well, one person still should be in control of all of it, I don't think it
Well,
it makes sense.
I would say this is a great conversation topic to get to the actuality of the thing, the where the rubber meets the road. I would say it would be successors' rights. So let's say Abner Doubleday invents this game, and there's a group of owners who self-associate, and they want to have 5, 6 teams and start a league, maybe license it from him to them, and then it succeeds, and then more teams are added to this thing, and it's so successors' rights. I would think there would be some kind of a legal
Mm,
continuity of who has the ownership. And then to JK, I assume she owns intellectual property rights.
yeah.
So I don't think you could earn money doing these things. I don't know if I'm not
There's
a
some kind of
lawyer.
licensing. Yeah, I'm sure there's some kind of licensing
Free
agreements around these
use.
things.
Well, there
Yeah, for
probably,
sure.
as long as you're not charging money, you could probably do free use. And obviously, in your head, you can make stuff up,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
Share stories with your neighbors and your community about fan
Right.
fiction and all the rest. But I don't think you could start a novel based on Hermione and Harry and Ron and fall without her permission, and then make
Exactly.
make millions of dollars and start a movie
Yeah.
company. So I think it's very, very dicey
Yeah.
when we talk about now this is the counterpoint, though, would be like the Olympics. Like I don't know who owns the Olympics. Like who owns track and field? Who owns the 100-meter
Yeah.
dash?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Good
like,
point.
Well,
Yeah.
and yeah, I was going to say the bigger point is, even with sports, nothing is stagnant. Nothing is the way it always was. Take the front crawl in swimming, okay? The guy who invented that, whenever that was, I doubt anybody knows his name because I'm sure it's an instinctual type of swim stroke. But the guy who invented that did it as an evolutionary advantage to beat his buddy in a race across a pond, right? And from that day to now we're in chlorinated pools with lanes, with starting, buzzers, with sensors on the side of the pools that detect when you actually touch the wall. And it's like, that's not what it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a good
And
point.
nobody's hung up. Nobody even cares about the guy who invented that to swim across his pond.
Yeah.
It's just what it is now.
Yeah.
But there's some, let's agree that that's the truth and that's the case. But there's some governing body that sets up the lanes and the chlorination level and how long and wide the pool is, and
Yeah. The
how the
regulations, right?
yes,
Yeah.
somebody, because it's not just like let's show up today and just start talking about it. Hey
Hmm.
Billy Bob, what do you think we should do today? Well, Jimmy, I think we should. No, it's like there's a rule book that
Yeah.
that is. So I don't
And,
know
and that's
how.
that's where the slippery slope of having to make this choice comes down. And I think it has to be left to the governing bodies of that organization. And
Yeah.
some are going to say, yes, we'll allow that trans person to compete. And others are going to say, no, we don't allow that. And I think they should be allowed to make that choice.
Yeah. And, if kind of back to the other points, if it probably exists, hopefully it exists, right, for the trans athlete that wants to compete in XYZ sport in this place where that governing body's like, no, we don't want you. Hopefully there is, another opportunity for that person where if it's in another state or something where they can still compete just because this one governing body. I think the whole point is we've kind of haven't talked about like federal legislation yet, but Neil points that out in the interview with Ben Shapiro that doesn't seem like a wide sweeping legislative thing that only people born with this reproductive organ can compete with the same reproductive organ in this sport, and this is a federal law. That doesn't seem to make any sense. I think we all agree on that, or the three of us, right?
I would agree with that. I don't know. By the way, I don't know what authority the federal government would have to even make such a thing, let alone
Yeah,
what
which
Yeah.
is a good thing. Yeah, which is a good thing, I think. So that's
I
good.
think it would be reserved for the states and the people who are, in the states who are organizing these on their own. I hate the
Yeah.
one size fits all based on federalism.
Right.
I really don't.
Yeah. I was thinking about again, just like specific individual scenarios. Let's bring it back to the kids thing. Because my neighbor was wanting me to sign these petitions around like what schools can do and kids 10, 12, whatever. With sports, there's little leagues. So if, I I'm speaking out of my experience here. I played little league football. I played like flag football like once, and I was like, not one time, but like I did it a season or whatever, and was like, nah, not for me. So I don't even remember how old I was. So I don't really know like ages in here, but I'm hypothetically ing a scenario here where a trans kid wants to, like, let's say a trans male, assigned female at birth trans male wants to play football and a little league, that's again that's it's up to them. If the governing body is like, yeah, they can play, this kid can play with us, it seems like that's potentially a win-win. Now if a parent is like, no, I'm not comfortable, well then hopefully they can have the conversation. And again, I don't think there's a one size fits all, but I like the idea.
Can I speak to this? This is an
Sure.
interesting take on it. I appreciate you telling your backstory. I'll tell mine just a little bit. So I played Little League baseball from as young as I can remember all the way through high school, and I played football from as young as I can remember all the way through high school. So I was extremely invested, and I'm not very good at all. So it wasn't like I was a superstar or whatever. I mean, I think I did varsity baseball, but I sucked pretty badly at football. But my point is I was heavily invested in it, but no one ever asked my opinion. Like, Bob, hey Bob, what do you think the rules should be? I just lined up and did what I was supposed to do. And I think most kids would probably do the same, where back to the point of the governing body should deliberate and make a choice. And then, I feel like John's neighbor, regardless of his point of view, is probably doing the right thing in trying to organize a petition to, I don't know if it's legislative or to ask the governing body. Was it legislative petition or was it to ask the sports authority to do it this way?
So I don't remember what the sports piece was, because I think there was two petitions. One of them was to have a law that schools.
A law. Okay.
Yeah, a law that the schools would have to tell parents if the student was expressing any kind of gender non-normativity, anything outside of the heteronormative experience. The schools had to inform the parents. And the sports thing, though, it could have been something similar as far as the law, but I don't know.
let's go back though. Let's just say it's just keep it a small case of like Pop Warner football or something. I don't know what kind of football you guys have, but the little league version of football before you get to high school was called Pop Warner football, and I assume it's some brand of some guy created a league. It's on the East Coast. I don't know. Anyway, I would assume one as a parent of a child in that organization or trying to get into the organization, that the right thing to do if they want to change the rules would be to petition their community to to in a professional way, to not to like shout at people, not to intimidate people, not to show up at the game drunk and throw bottles at people, to form some form of a petition. This is the democratic process to ask the governing body, respectfully. We're not demanding, we're not telling you have to do this, but to ask the creators of the thing, would you please create the rule set as follows, and let the dialogue begin. That was the first thing I was thinking of, not the law side. Let's just leave that alone for now, because I think the legal process and the the governance process is a whole separate can of worms, and you guys kind of know I'm not really a typical case for what I think the governance should be. So I think let's leave that to the side. But number two, I do think if we were to change rule sets, like a governing body would change rule sets, certain sports there might be a difficulty burdened by the participants, and specifically I'm thinking like combat sports. So in combat sports, I would assume that the participants are putting more on the line than just their egos and the chance to be on the top of the podium. But there's a physicality risk level associated with boxing, wrestling, MMA, these kind of things. So and I have daughters, so I would have to. I haven't considered this. My daughters are not in combat sports, but I'd have to consider what would it mean for my daughters to be in a combat sports situation with someone who had hormonal advantages, perhaps, and etc., that would literally put them at risk, meaning above a risk level inherent with the activity itself. Whereas like swimming, bicycling, 100-meter dash, these kind of things, and I, there's not really a lot of tennis, I mean, what's going to happen? The ball's going to hit you or something? I don't know. But you see what I mean? But like having, because I think there is a reason why one would separate male and female boxing. And I don't know if you guys have watched MMA or boxing or anything like that, combat sport. It would not go well for a female. It would not go well for a female, to the point of like potential, catastrophic injury or death.
Well, I think for me it's easy with combat sports, right? I think we look too much into it. With combat sports, you have to sign a contract to fight somebody. And if I'm in a women's league and all of a sudden there's a 260-pound woman who was born as a man, and she's on that league now, and she's legit trans, always identified it as a woman, always felt of themselves as a woman, and they're on that league now, I don't have to sign that contract to fight them. Nobody does. And all of a sudden it's like, well, okay, yes, you are the number one world-class belt-holding heavyweight in your division with a record of 0-0. Nobody's going to take that from you. We're just going to sign fights to fight each other. And by each other, I mean everybody who's not that 260-pound trans person. And that excludes them. And that's maybe not fair, but life isn't fair. You still get to say, yes, you're the top woman fighter in this martial arts discipline in the world. That's fine. That's yours to have.
Yeah.
But I think, and it kind of became clear to me, like with the swimmer while we were talking about this. So, I mean, being trans is basically saying my mental reality does not mesh with my physical reality.
Mm.
And you're choosing to live with your mental reality. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think part of that, and I understand that they want that acceptance from society, and I think they should have it. But I think that comes with the responsibility that when it comes to things like sports, that they have to recognize that their mental reality of that sport does not match the physical reality. And the physical reality is you are only the top person in women's sports because you are physically have the man's body. And for us to accept the trans person, they have to accept that in certain cases, it's always going to be seen, and really, it's the truth that you're only the best in this situation because you were born with that body.
And I still think, like, I'm just not like 100% sold on, like, first of all, I don't think either of you are saying I think you're saying those are single stories, but I don't think you're saying it's the only story.
No.
And that's what I'm convinced, like, again, this is all kind of hypothetical, right? I mean, don't you think it's entirely possible one day that some, like, a biological woman will outswim the trans swimmer? Like, it just seems too, like, simplistic and reductive to just be like, because she was born male and went through male puberty, um, she'll be undefeated. Nobody can even touch just because of that fact.
Forever?
I bet.
No.
Yeah,
Well, John,
but I think there's plenty of, like.
Could I talk about the evolution of sex
Yeah,
differences real quick?
because just like time check, we're kind of getting, we
Yeah,
got like 25 minutes or so, and so yeah, let's go there.
because I think this would maybe because there are going to be exceptions. I think that's undeniable, and I think the spectrum is real, and trying to conform a single event of a single race of a single sport into the spectrum is just inherently difficult. But let's talk about where people are coming from in acknowledging sex differences. And I'm just going to talk real quick about, well, let me put a label on it. You guys familiar with ligers and tigans?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen Napoleon Dynamite. The liger. Anyway, no, go ahead.
Okay. It is real, John.
So these are, species is an arbitrary distinction. It's a label humans have created. But there's animals that are, we will call them different species. So tigers and lions. And then they can reproduce. So sometimes, interspecies reproduction is possible. And in this case, you will get a different offspring depending upon which type of, whether the lion or the tiger was the female or the lion or the tiger was the male. And it shines a bright light on an interesting situation, which is the adaptation of sexuality, sexual reproduction. Not talking about gender, I'm not talking about culture, talking the biology of the thing. So going back to asexual reproduction, you would have a single cell that splits itself, and the cell is comprised of both the cellular membrane, the cytoplasm, the organelles, and the informational layer. So DNA, let's just say. And this cell would split off and create two identical copies of the same organism. And these identical copies then would split again and again and again. But there's not a lot of variation in this form of reproduction. and there's not a lot of specialization because both halves have to have both the cellular mechanism and the information in total on each side. But what happens with cellular reproduction is you get, and they all come from an asexual progenitor. So your ancestor is asexual, and then over time, sexuality evolves. And what's so interesting is throughout all the animal classifications that have become sexually reproductive, the same phenomenon happens over and over again, not just animals, but plants as well. And that is the specialization between gamete size. So the gamete is the reproductive cell in the organism. And what ends up happening is you have a minimum threshold. We have to have a cell wall. We have to have cytoplasm. We have to have organelles. And that's a requirement. But there's no need for both sides, what we call male and female, both sides to have that entire structure, because that structure is very costly and burdensome. So what ends up happening, like pollen in plants or sperm in mammalian species, what you end up with is a miniaturization and high volume tactic with the male gamete, which is male is another way to say small gamete. So you're going to have a small gamete that's based on information. You're going to have a large gamete that's based on information plus all of the cellular mechanisms. And so you end up with various strategies by the small gamete portion of the living organism and the large gamete portion of the living organism. And these are the beginnings of the sexual dimorphism, where you have differences in expression of physicality, excuse me, the actual, application of the genetics, because obviously humans are, how can I put this? Embryotically, they're very much the same, and there are certain things like nipples that are shared. Okay, there's a reason why nipples are shared, is because that evolved prior to in the embryonic sense, prior to the sexual differentiation. So males have nipples, it doesn't matter, they're useless, but they're there. Females have nipples, and they're attached to mammary glands, and that's very powerful because mammals have an adaptation where they've sexually dimorphized. They have a splitting of the roles that the sexes inhabit, and the large gamete sex is creating internally an immature version of itself that has to have tons of support after birth. So it's got to be immature because we have giant heads, and giant heads will not pass through a birth canal. So we have to birth our giant-headed offspring in a very premature nature, whereas like a gazelle will learn to run in like an hour or two. Lots of these animals can behave in a limited version, but almost like a mini adult almost immediately, and keep up with the herd, so to speak. But humans take years and years and years of infancy and adolescence before they can become mature enough to be self-sufficient. So part of that process is the passing through the birth canal. Another process is feeding these animals, these little immature animals that are unable to feed themselves. So milk production. So mammals are evolved to have milk production, and the milk production also acts as a prophylactic to pregnancy. So as the female is lactating, she is blocking her ability to become impregnated again. So it's like a natural cycle. As long as there's continual stimulation of the mammary glands, she is very unlikely to become pregnant again. And that allows for this period of time for the one baby to be nourished and weaned into an adolescent stage before the next one comes up. And so there's structures in the male side that are built around spreading their seed, their pollen, if you will, So there's massive competition in the sperm count. So a male has hundreds of millions of sperm per ejaculation. So there's a little race that's being run within a race, so to speak. So just because, male A versus male B gets to female X, which one of the sperms gets to the egg of female X? That's a competition within a competition. So there's massive amounts of variation that allows for survival of the fittest and evolution of a more fit next generation, depending upon the environment at hand. So things like body fat percentage, hip to waist ratio, obviously breast development, and then for males, the biological fact over evolution that it doesn't take many males in a population to maintain a stable growing population, but it takes a very significant number of females. So females can have, one male could impregnate many females, but the opposite is not true. You can't have many males and one female. So there's significant biological differences that have occurred throughout human evolution. Obviously, this is, once again, we have formula, we have ways to take care of children socially and et cetera. I mean, it doesn't mean that today we have to abide by these things. I'm just saying that there is an underlying nature to inherent sex differences on the average. So on the extremes, you can definitely have, to John's point, you could probably have a female swimmer who outswims, any man. I'm sure that exists or has existed or will exist in the future. And, just to say any human that plays in the NBA is an outlier, I think is pretty reasonable statement, right? I mean, just regardless of male, female, to be 7 foot tall is an enormous outlier biologically. So there are things in play that are not one-to-one, but I do think looking back at why are there male and female? Like what happened in the evolution of life on Earth such that, and then with plants, they can be hermaphroditic. So they're both producing pollen and receiving pollen so that they can create seeds. So they do both at the same time. But, the strategies attached to producing small gametes versus large gametes is a tell on how that organism is built to behave. And so
there's a lot to process.
Well, just back to the beginning, you end up with Tigons and Ligers, where it matters which species is female and which species is male. Like the offspring will be different. One final little point that's really interesting in my opinion, mitochondria. So mitochondria is an organelle inside all of our cells, and it's like a little powerhouse. And it has its own form of information layer, so mitochondrial DNA. And what ends up happening is these are exclusively passed down through the female lineage. So you can go and test a lineage of the females through the mitochondrial DNA, as no males have. As we're not, males are not large gamete producers. There is no aspect of a male transferring their bodily mitochondria to the next generation. Only the information layer gets passed on through the male side, and the female side's always passed down the mitochondrial structure through their large gametes. Which is quite fascinating in of itself, by the way, that we have this thing called the mitochondria. It seems like it was in ancient times a combination of organisms where the animal side of our ancient ancestors somehow took in like maybe a bacteria or something and created. So it's like it's got its own lineage. It's like a little alien living in all of our cells. But it only gets passed down through the large gametes because it doesn't fit within the small gamete sperm. So it's very interesting that there's this thing inside of all of our cells that keeps us alive. It gives us the powers we have, but it's probably like a little alien thing that has its own DNA and it has its own informational layer that that just gets carried on and on through this one example, probably one example in deep history of one cell absorbing and becoming symbiotic with another cell.
Wow. I feel like I want to like look more into that now. It does seem completely mind-blowing and interesting.
I hope what you just said there, Bob, doesn't get heard by the wrong person, or next week on History Channel will be ancient alien theorists believe that mitochondria was implanted by an ancient visitation.
I'm gonna take that, Tucker, because I do think there is a possible Fermi paradox explanation, and it is how rare. This is not my idea, by the way. How rare it is to go from a non-nucleated cell to a nucleated cell, and then from a nucleated cell to a nucleated cell with a mitochondria. Like these little baby steps that happen in deep history might be so unbelievably rare and hard to accomplish that if there is a great filter why we are the only observable intelligent life in the universe, it might be because of that. I'm not joking. Like that one thing, the mitochondria, and to having a cell nucleus might be the thing that is literally a one in a, I mean, I can't even think of what the statistical number is. How many galaxies and hundreds of billions, and how many planets per galaxy is, trillions and trillions. I mean, it's so mind-boggling, but it might literally be that. It might literally be that one cell took another cell into itself is such a rare thing and impossible to imagine that they survive and that they work symbiotically, that it's literally like what you just said, like an alien, it's almost like a miracle or something. I mean, it's ridiculous how improbable that may be.
Wow. I'm
Yeah,
not even sure where to go now.
Let's take a journey. So what if that ubiquitous cell is actually seeded throughout space, but it has to, and this goes back to the book I just read, it has to get on the surface of a planet before there's an atmosphere to burn up in on entry? Or was there a period in time on Earth where the carbon dioxide level was high enough that it didn't burn up on re-entry because there wasn't enough oxygen to burn it?
Yeah, there was a time. So oxygen is thought to be
a process from life, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we have an understanding that if we were to obtain light and put it through a spectrometer from another planet, and if we were to see oxygen as one of the elements that gives off a wavelength that we can observe and through spectrometry figure out, we would presume that there would be life on that planet. And on this planet, there was a pre-oxygen atmosphere at a certain point, obviously.
So you could really seed a galaxy with life. I mean, there could actually be multiple races trying to seed the galaxy with life, and it's just whoever's little cells reach the planet first, colonize on the bacterial level up to creating oxygen from plants, and once there's an atmosphere, that other race's cells can't make it to the surface.
That's interesting. I like that.
I don't know how we got here on a sexuality podcast, but this is the way my brain works.
No, it's fun. Yeah, because I'm like, transition back to sports. How do we do that?
Well, that's how we did it, because there's two races and they're competing.
Oh, yeah, so right. Yeah, the
full
competition.
circle.
Yes.
Full circle.
Yeah, there you go. Bingo. That's awesome.
It's a big circle, but it is a circle.
Yeah. Well, this is good. Actually, I'm thinking maybe we kind of wrap this up, and if you guys are cool to continue this one, at least one more episode, because there is the question that I like the way you phrase it. I'll just go ahead and read the question now, but I kind of don't want to get into it because I think it could easily be 90 minutes of talking through, we talked about it a little bit in the last episode, but I'm going to read the way you wrote this question, Bob, so we can kind of preface the next episode. If you guys are cool, we'll go in this route.
Yeah, we definitely got
About
another episode there.
Before you throw this in there, John, while we were talking, I had one other thing. Maybe we throw it to the docket, maybe we don't. I thought of one other instance, because I think we talked about the two, and you're going to read the second, and obviously we've been talking about sports. Prison.
Oh, yeah, right.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's a good one too.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned that in a previous episode. Like, that's in the way that we have this history of segregating sports. Well, we segregate prisons too.
Yeah. And you're not going to. Well, typically we don't build 4 or 5 different versions of a prison. It's like one of these things. Like, I'm trying to find all the examples that require conformity. The military. Let's say the military. Let's say prisons. Like that. Like the concept of and I'll let you. I'll relinquish here, and I'll let you talk about the last question. But like, I think there's something very inherently interesting in figuring out how to decide upon these things that don't allow for massive variation. Who gets to decide these things, and how do we decide them?
Right. Yeah. Let's plan for that next episode. We'll go into that as well as this question. Again, we briefly talked about it previously, and this came directly from my neighbor, when he was talking about a 12-year-old is too young to make decisions that affect their life, like their destiny was the word he used. So, but yeah, the way Bob phrased this, what is the age of being a minor and having a parent or guardian legally, morally in charge of and responsible for deciding on everything, versus the age of majority, where the person becomes legally, morally in charge of their own life and decisions that impact their life. So tons to talk about there. So yeah, that'll be fun to dig into that. This was great to go through the sports thing. I kind of thought, like, we won't have much. We're not, again, none of us are real big sports dudes, so like, I didn't think we would fill a whole episode just about the kind of sports, just the sports topic. So very cool for me.
No, I love it.
It's not and that's the beauty, I think, in what we're trying to push is more of a philosophy, is that when you actually accept that things aren't binary in almost any circumstance, it becomes a much bigger conversation.
Yeah.
It becomes much more interesting when you're exploring all possibilities than just trying to decide between two.
Right. I'm going to read a haiku. I have to pull it up, but I wrote this recently, and thank you for saying it that way, Tucker, because it reminded me of it. And then there was something else I was going to say that when you think, recognizing that things, especially when things don't fit in this binary thing, it becomes more interesting. I would argue even like so much more potential to find beauty when you do that as well. And this haiku I wrote, it is more likely for a positive outcome when we include all.
Nice.
Agreed.
Cool. So let's look forward to that next week. I do have a new quote I'll share here. Any parting words before we call it, though?
I think we could talk about anything for hours.
Yep.
I know, right? Huzzah to that.
Huzzah. Cheers. Cheers. I
Right
love
on,
that.
all right.
I think that is the flow state. So I'm always down for that.
Yeah. Yep. Cool. So this quote is from Charles Darwin. How about that? It is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the ones most responsive to change.